Hello, everyone, and welcome to Wisdom Seeker Podcast. Glad to have you this morning. I see that we've got folks already waiting to enjoy and be a part. Welcome, Zaid and Mary and VJ. Glad to have you with us today. And I know we have addressed this topic previously, but after looking at what's going on LinkedIn Network, looking out around us at what's going on, decided that this is something worth dealing with again, and maybe looking at it from some different angles. So be sure and let me know where you're joining from. It's always great to hear where our audience is located. And just as we always do, I like to be sure and share our perspective of what wisdom is. And wisdom is a journey that we are on, or hopefully we're on. I think that some people have lost sight of the journey, but it starts with knowledge, which is great. And knowledge comes from a lot of different um, sources and opportunities, and it's facts and figures and information, which is all really great to have. But unfortunately, a lot of people stop there, gain knowledge, and think that, and as people have said at times, that they have power. And personally, I think knowledge by itself is not power. It is a just the first step in growing in wisdom. Our second step in that process is to gain understanding. And most of the time, we gain real understanding through experience, taking the knowledge we've gained and applying it in real life, using it in practical ways, and beginning to use it to help deal with problems, concerns, issues of our own. And then the third step in this journey towards wisdom is when we make the big step, and that is when we begin to look at things outside of ourselves, see that much larger picture, begin to figure out that what we are about is not just about us, that it's about those around us and the world that we live in, and it affects many other people. And for those of you, for us that are of a spiritual bent, what way we like to express it is our goal is to see things through God's eyes, so that we again begin to make choices, apply our knowledge and our understanding to not just our own issues, but to the bigger picture, the greater world around us. So that's the what when we talk about wisdom, that's what we're talking about is the journey towards growing beyond just having knowledge or even just understanding. So welcome. Glad to have Lisa and Dr. Jasmine and Lee. Rick, glad to see you. Ambreen, glad to have you as well. And also the India Academy of Entrepreneurship. I believe that's my friend VJ. And then Ronald, glad to have you. Glad to see a lot of you here. So appears that I'm not the only one that is interested in having a conversation in regards to this topic. It continues to plague us with challenges. By the way, when I'm looking down, I'm not distracted. I'm actually monitoring what's going on my phone. I actually have 3 different screens going on to make this work. So welcome, Joseph. Glad to have you. So one of the things as we talk about topics, I like to refer to some visuals. I guess I'll always be a teacher at heart, and I know that there are a number of people that do best learning visuals. So let me bring on to the screen a visual here, and want to take a look at this, because I believe when we began to consider this and look at all I did in this case was Google education versus learning. So any of you could do the same to gain some insight. And so what's real interesting is that there is a lot of opinion in regard to the differences between education and learning, and that they are not necessarily synonymous based on what I see out here, and including a consideration of online versus in person. So it's a rather challenging topic that we deal with. And I believe that we need to continue to seek wisdom on this, because it has become such a priority topic. We spend a lot of money on it, and we spend a lot of time, and we have culturally determined that this is worth a big value to have education. And the concern, I believe, with currently is that we are maybe has some misalignment. We certainly have some challenges with being unaccessible. And so we've got some real challenges, and I hope that we can begin to come to some conclusions, get some common ground, and maybe begin to get wisdom to make better choices and to affect things culturally. Again, a lot of different aspects to all of this, and that we need to really think through and consider. Welcome from YouTube, 100% True. Glad to have you here also. Thanks for the support on this topic. So let's background on this. My friend Zeiad tagged me on a poll that he is put out, and his question was, is education a right or a privilege as a human? And it got me to thinking, and that's one topic, and I hope you will follow the link to go and vote in his poll. But what I think we've got a misunderstanding going on, and that is education and learning mutually exclusive? In other words, is the only way to learn is through education? And let me clarify so that we are talking the same language. Quite often when we get into discussions, part of the problem we encounter is that we are not using agreed upon terms, and so we end up getting crossed up just based on terminology. So for me, and what way I'm referencing this, is that education is the formal process that we have in place, and it's typically built around an academic premise and practice. And quite often, not as much true now, but quite often it's attached to brick and mortar facilities and some kind of entity. And so when I'm using the term education, that's what I am referring to. Whereas learning, again, from where I'm coming from on this, and is that learning is about something that we pursue, and we go and find knowledge and begin to get understanding, and then learn how to practically use what we find. And it's driven by us primarily versus someone else. So just to give a little bit of context to the conversation, try to avoid confusion over terms as we talk about this. And I'm looking forward, by the way, to hearing your comments as we go along. So my question in the poll that I put out is education and learning basically the same thing. And in my opinion, they are not. And also, just so you know, for those that don't know me and my background, I was in industry running my own business for a number of years. And then I moved into the education arena. I've been a school teacher and I've worked in the world of an education nonprofit. I continue to be a trainer. And so I am steeped in education in various forms. So that's where I'm coming from. And I tell you what, before I get too far into it, let me get your comments because they are critical to the quality of our show. Quality education is important, but getting to the point to make sure our students are learning what is needed. Thanks, Lisa. That is true. One of the big challenges right now is that K-12, which is pre-college or pre-university, and universities currently, a lot of real question about whether they're teaching what we need to be successful or whether it's being taught based on an outmoded model. Excuse me. Okay, and Lisa defines the education process of receiving or giving systematic instruction, especially at a school or university. Okay, that's good. And Lisa also shares that education is the process of facilitating learning or the acquisition of knowledge, skills, values, morals, beliefs, habits, and personal development. Education originated as a transmission of cultural heritage from one generation to the next. Certainly part of it, and yes, certainly should be facilitating learning. I challenge a bit whether that happens. It's more about spoon feeding information, knowledge to us. And again, please understand as I talk, I am speaking in general terms that there are some outstanding education initiatives and entities out there. So please understand when I speak that that's my point of reference is our generalized situation. Hello, Tiff. Glad to have you here as well. So let's continue on with some of the comments. Lee suggests that it's a privilege. Can't have a right that forces the action of another. If it was a right, that means you're forcing someone else to teach you. I call that slavery. Okay. The other question in the case of right versus privilege is that cost and so on. Interesting to consider. I would suggest that we all have the right to learn, and we should not be interfered with in pursuit of that within certain constraints, obviously. But for the most part, we should have the right to learn all we can learn and choose to pursue. Versus education given as a right means that we are then demanded of to pay for this education and support it. And in an ideal world, if it was self-sustaining, that would be great. But in our current situations, we do not have self-sustaining education, generally speaking, with a few exceptions, private institutions, and even those I question a bit about self-sustaining in the fact that a lot of them are paid for by student loans, and I'm not sure. Those of you from other parts of the world, you might share if that kind of approach to education is a part of your culture or not. But here in the U.S., it's a big part and it's a big problem. So let's see. Let me get back to your comments again. Want to hear your thoughts. Okay, Lisa says education is a basic human right. Quality education is in the UN Sustainable Development Goal number 4. That's where some of, I think, our disagreement comes in. Is this a right to education? Bear in mind, and I would, just for my opinion, and it's just my opinion, that I don't know that education in the sense of institutional exposure to knowledge and all that that I refer to with education is a right. I certainly like the fact that it can be available, certainly an option, but in current terms, we have very much an option to learn without ever having to go that route. And I'll share examples. I serve on the board of 2 online universities, and the goal of those universities is to make learning, okay, and even education readily available to as many people as possible with minimal cost. And I certainly support it. I'm part of it, and encourage people to take advantage of those. So as I'm talking about the topic, I'm not saying that people should not seek out education. I think the problem is that we have missed a priority in terms of that. And I'll give an example in that we have come to culturally equate education and character. And there is a correlation, but it's not causal. Education will help you have more knowledge and more information, but character is a different altogether quality, a different part. Character is critical, and we are challenged in our cultures now in regards to character. But getting more education doesn't give more character. Now, education systems do include character education, knowledge, and those things. But at the end of the day, real character is based on life experience and being mentored by family, friends, whatever, generally speaking. Now, having been a teacher, I know that there are some outstanding teachers out there that have impacted young people, changed their lives and all, but that's not a product of the design of our education system. That's a product of great teachers that work hard to make a difference. So in my mind, again, my opinion, education as we have it is not a human right. I see it as a privilege. I see it as, certainly making it available, but learning I see as a human right that we should not curtail or restrict people from learning, again, with minor exceptions in terms of trying to learn to do wrong things. That's a different story. But general terms, I think that we need to have great opportunity to learn and encourage it in many ways. ATIF says, the relationship between formal education and pragmatic life is merely symbolic. And that's a concern that I have as an educator, and just so you'll know, I am a certified, just up until just recently was a certified teacher. And I've had to have a teacher education. I've actually trained teachers. And recently, I worked to earn an honorary PhD in education. So I'm very intentional about this subject and learning about it. And I am concerned, just as ATIF has commented, that at current situation that we education, the systematic approach of education is losing touch with the real world or the realities of what's needed. and it's become a great deal of trouble. The other arena that I work in is workforce. I'm very intentional, learn a lot about workforce development. That was originally driven for me by working with young people and as a teacher, realizing that, yeah, education and learning and all that's great, but we need to make sure that whatever it is practical and actually prepares young people. Well, in the workforce now, very common complaint among a great deal of students that are highly educated, including degreed, is that the education they're getting doesn't match up with these skills and information needed for them to be prepared for a career, whatever that career is. So there's becoming more evident that even at the university level that there's a big disconnect, and that we're focused on education as a system different than using it as a preparation for life and work. In fact, one of the concepts that's been around a while is one about education is not a means to an end, but it is an end in itself. And it's attributable historically back to Benjamin Franklin that just the experience of education is preparing people for life. And again, if you look into it and see what's going on there, a couple of factors. One is that it's, again, continues to be a disconnect. Secondly, unfortunately, in many ways, it's become what is required to qualify for degrees and things has become agenda related, and as a result, it's also driving expense. It's truly remarkable how much institutional education costs now, and that is an obstacle that is something we need to overcome. So let's see. Rick asked a question: are we teaching kids what to think instead of how to think? Rick, I think that is a real issue. Again, if you look at just the pure practice, the things that are driving systematic education is major exams, passing tests to get to a point. And it's a real problem. Even when I was teaching, there was an effort on the part of my school, and it was present and still is present and even gotten worse, to say that we could not allow students to fail. And being someone that of a principle that I gave every student every chance to learn and pass and succeed, but there are sometimes people choose not to do what is necessary, and I refuse to just let people go along just to make it look good. I would give everything I had to help a student learn and to be successful, but if they didn't make the choices to do so, then they didn't pass my class. And to Rick's point, the idea is that I wanted them, and my effort was to help them to learn and think and drive their own learning. And I can get into some of the teaching I do for teachers and trainers. But one of the primary goals is, as an effective teacher or trainer, is to get to a point where learning is driven by the individuals, and the teacher is not in a place to lecture or feed, but rather to facilitate, helping them learn how to think, how to reason, and how to process. And Lisa talks about passing individuals who don't learn. That's a systematic problem, and it's not just a something that people do, um, on an individualized basis. It has become a systematic design that we won't allow young people to fail, and that's part of the systematic education problem. Uh, and thanks for the comment, Lisa, that the definition should be true, but it's not there at this point. Um, and my concern is we are not moving in a good direction in general terms. It has become so ingrained and institutionalized and now driven by money that it's really sad. Welcome, Awanji, and welcome, Richard. Glad to have you guys with us. Let's see. Zaid wants to clarify, and I appreciate that. The background I was referring to, the attitude of the student towards the process. Based on the attitude, we see the quality of the outcome in the workplace. And if education were working the way that it should, the idea is the outcome would be that young people are prepared for being successful in earning, and it would affect. It shouldn't be designed to prepare young people for life. That's not education's responsibility. That's parents' responsibility. But the education should be based on good outcome in the workplace. Let's see, ATIF comments, moreover, private and quality education is for elites only. And I have to say this, and I may step on some toes, even make somebody mad, and that's not my goal, but possibly going to happen. And that is that part of what drives current education priority in our culture, in our society, is elitism. And it's so evident when you look around, it's remarkable. I think that one of the most eye-opening things for me is related to diplomas issued by high schools. I found out as a teacher, I began to dig into some of the history of diplomas. And what was fascinating is when I first started teaching, we actually had 3 diploma tracks for high school. We had one that's called college prep, and then we had one that was called career prep, and then we had one that was a combination of the two. And the problem in that arena is that quite often those that were classified as career prep were stigmatized and considered second rate. So in our state, we went to a single diploma, which on the surface seems like a good idea. The problem was when they did that, the adopted design there was based on not on a basic education, then foundation to pursue a different pathways after high school. It was based on everybody going to college. And what was the other thing that was interesting to me is as I learned the history of the diplomas, originally there was one high school diploma, and there was a move in our state, and I suspect this is not unique, but there was a move among people that were being prepared to go to college to be recognized differently than those that were more focused on a career path. And the idea was that those that were going to college were somehow more elite. And so there is evidence of elitism all throughout education. And it's unfortunate because, again, education is helpful. Learning, I think, is more important, but your level of education attainment doesn't make you any better. And those that don't have educational attainment aren't any worse. Education's education. It's not determinant of us as a quality of person. Okay. Yeah, I know Lisa and I have talked that they have, excuse me, Global Goodwill Ambassadors has started an institute and and trying to offer some different options. And I am, just so you'll know, I'm working to help support them in that, because I think that as we look at approaching education differently, we're going to do well um, in what we do. Uh, Lee, thanks for coming. Appreciate it. Um, have a good day. We'll see you next time. Okay, Mwanji makes a comment. This is an opportunity for me to more of what education, because I'm working vulnerable children where some feel like they don't want this education of going back to class and need to be practical. I believe, if I understand Mwanji, your concern is that um, that we've lost the practical needs in looking at education. And I agree completely that we have a lot of people that are very educated but have very few practical skills, and they end up not finding those out and learning how to use them until they get out of the education system. um, and oh, Lee, you hung around a little longer. He says, why does institutional education cost so much? It is government involvement is part of it, certainly supports the expenses. But um, I have to be careful because I do not like to assign motivations to people. One of the observations I've made, though, is those in the education arena, especially at the university level, one of the expenses that gets contributed is high cost of books. And the fact that within institutional education, you have professors that write books that they then and publish and sell, and they require them for the class. Little bit of question about conflict of um, interest there, it appears to me anyway. Let's see, Richard's comment: educational institutions are business. Unless they realize that their consumers' behavior has changed, there will continue to be a decrease in enrollment. Very much so. You know, part of the challenge, and I encountered this as a teacher because I would challenge some of the norms to consider how we can make it and improve it to be more pragmatic, practical, real, and available. And what I really began to realize is that it is a business, but it's also an ideology. And in my situation, the program that I taught was building construction. And I was really shocked when I went to help provide support and resources to the situation. And I was told that having outside influence by business was in some ways not welcome, because somehow business and being involved might somehow taint the education process. And that really floored me. And the more I have observed and seen, this is an ideology among institutional education, that somehow that those driving the education system know better than those of us that ultimately employ these graduates and so on, and that those of us outside of the education system might somehow taint the process of education. And again, going back to an elite mindset, that those not within the education system somehow will not be able to do well for it. Welcome, Gabrielle. I hope I've pronounced it correctly. And Gabrielle's comment is, perhaps the problem is that we have a system at all. Without a system, I wonder what education would look like. Uh, Gabrielle, I understand, and I'm torn on it because I see the value of education pedagogy and learning styles and some of the science that's involved in learning how to help people learn. And sometimes an institutional setting helps foster that and maintain some standards. So, but on the other hand, especially now with all the information that's available to us through Google, through YouTube, and as a personal thought for me is LinkedIn. There's an and LinkedIn and these other entities are not education institutions, but they contain enough knowledge and education material that if people wanted to learn, they would not be able to get degrees. But if they want to learn and even have a level of knowledge and understanding at a PhD level, it's out there. And if someone's motivated enough, they can gain the understanding, the learning at those levels. Now, the problem is we don't recognize that, and therefore we don't get the much coveted degrees. But part of my challenge, current circumstances, is the real value at this point of degrees. I'll throw out a couple of pieces of information that people aren't aware of, that 70% of people that get degrees aren't even working in the career area that their education is targeted. And so the degree itself is apparently not necessary from a work standpoint, because we have many people employed working and even doing so successfully in an area that the degree has nothing to do with. And the other concern that I see out there is that working in the workforce area, working with businesses, the complaints are getting much greater that people coming out with degrees, even specialized degrees, are not prepared for the field that they're trying to work in even. And it goes back to the concept of learning, because much of what drives systematic education is passing the next test. And that's unfortunate, because most of the testing that is done, not all of it, but most of it is done on a knowledge level. It doesn't assess whether you can apply the knowledge, whether you can reason through it. It is designed to test at a knowledge level. Written exams, generally speaking, that's the way they're written. You get into psychometrics on it and so on, and really find out that's the case. And so I know I kind of launched off, but going back to Gabrielle's comment about a system, there's value in it, but current circumstances, I don't think having systems is necessarily required. And I think something that we need to really consider as we set priorities. And Somnath comments that educate yourself in time, or else life will teach you throughout the span. Really true. We will learn. We can learn intentionally and hopefully a little bit easier, or life will teach us a lot of lessons, and they're hard and quite often painful if we're not intentional about it. Richard comments, the topic needs a part 2 episode. May have to. Again, it's funny, not haha funny, but interesting, unique, in that we've talked about this topic on numerous times, and we continue to find areas to grow in and learn in. Welcome, Michelle. Glad to have you. Glad to see you made it. Michelle's actually lives in this area, and so practically a neighbor. So welcome aboard. Let's see. Somnath says, if we observe our children carefully in early stage, there they show up their trend in particular interest. We need to educate them accordingly. No common prescription for everyone. It will always fail every after interval. Yeah, that's part of the problem with systematic education currently. Welcome, Anton. Glad to have you with us. The challenge that we have with systematic education now is it's become production. Okay, it's become fit into this mold that has been defined, or you are not successful. And it does not allow for uniqueness of individuals. And again, I understand that we need to get a foundational degree of learning or education to where we can function, where we can read effectively, where we can do written communication effectively, and math at a basic level. And we could, if we have time, I'll break down some of that some more. But what's really puzzling to me is that those levels of being prepared and being literate, if you will, occur in most education systems by what we call the 8th grade. And the evidence to support that is if you look at much of what's published as news, as magazines, and so on, they're written at an 8th grade level. So we are, generally speaking, assuming that we follow the model, systematic model that's out there. By the time young people have completed the 8th grade, they are functionally literate to be able to be out in the world and to be in jobs and so on. So it's just, again, the alignments are truly off. Anton asks, tell me something about genocide. Wow, that's a big topic of itself. If you'll clarify how that's related to our topic of education, be glad to look at that or comment. Otherwise, we may need to consider that as a topic for another podcast. Let's see. Somnath says degrees are needed to enter the arena, the job market. You know, what's really interesting, Somnath, and now I don't know that this number or percentage is accurate all over, but in the U.S., and I do think in general, these percentages reflect accurately, whether they're exact or not. But in the U.S., our job market only requires degrees for 30% of the jobs in the job market. The majority of the jobs that are out and very productive and make a good opportunity to earn a good wage and live, is the majority of them are 70% do not require degrees. Most of them are based in having a K-12 education or high school diploma, whatever term is preferred. And that is a misnomer that has been put out about education, is that you've got to have a degree to be successful. And one of the areas that I deal with, I work with a great organization called the Independent Electrical Contractors Association, and I do workforce recruiting for them because there are opportunities for people to work in the electrical industry that are going unfilled right now. And we're talking about jobs that are pay well and offer career opportunities that are as good as any. And yet they're going unfilled because we are so focused culturally on getting people to earn degrees. And it's not necessary. So when we truly look at it, it's insightful. And I know it was eye-opening for me when I went out of the business arena into the education arena. I assumed in my ignorance that everybody, or more people than not, had degrees in our world. And at that time in the U.S., the number of people bearing a degree, bachelor's level or higher, was only about 20% of the population. And at that time, the amount of jobs requiring degrees was about equal. It was an economic equilibrium, if you will, supply and demand. And so we have managed to sell a priority for institutional education that is not real. I appreciate it. Somnath is a longtime friend, and I know him as Sandas, and so I will use that Sandas. Thank you. Anyway, there's a misunderstanding about the value of bearing a degree from school. There's certain careers that they require degrees. And so if that is a determined direction for a young person, for parents of the young people to guide them in that fashion, by all means, seek out and get the best education possible with the right degrees and so on. But before defaulting to the idea that the answer for everybody is to get a degree, people need to check. I have some articles on my LinkedIn profile that give you more information, more perspective on some of this to truly find out if that's necessary. In fact, when we're off the podcast, I will share some links from some of the articles and videos on education in case it could be of some benefit to anyone about how to make better choices. And as I believe Lisa and some of the others have reflected, that education needs to be based not on just going to get a degree for the sake of getting a degree. Those education decisions should be based on career direction. And as Sandas comments, we as parents, and me now as a grandparent, the best thing I can do is begin to observe and understand my children, my grandchildren, and encourage them to learn and grow in their own life and purpose. And one of the other education problems we have is we have parents that are pushing their children in directions, and they're trying to correct their mistakes in their children, and as a result pushing their children to be a better version of themselves, when that's wrong. I don't mean to be blunt, but it is. What we need to be doing is encouraging our children, our grandchildren, to find their design, God's design for them, and pursue being the best of that design they can be. And sometimes they will be similar to us as parents and grandparents. Sometimes it'll be very remarkably different, and we have to be willing to help encourage them in those paths. And this whole topic, big thing for me at this point about systematic education is that it is misaligned with the needs of both the young people and the culture we have to live and work in. We have become to a point where institutional education is about earning educational attainment more than preparing for what is going on in the world we live in. And that's what concerns me. And for those that need that type of institutional education to pursue the direction they need to go in, it is becoming more difficult. A couple of real life examples, I like to share those because to me, there's value in learning from life. One of them has to do with a recent encounter I had with a gentleman. We were in an event, and he had brought his child to this event. It was actually a skill competition. And the gentleman heard me speaking about one of our universities and said that he had attended that university. and that he had obtained a degree, and that degree was in the criminal justice area. And he went on to share that he got this degree, but his actual employment was in the area of landscaping, which was fascinating. Based on our conversation, it appeared that that was something he wanted to do. And but what was even more remarkable is the gentleman said he had been out of this university for 18 years and was still paying student loans, and he would be paying them for an additional 15 years. So the debt related to the current institutional education is truly unfortunate, and it is causing people to get into careers that they don't like. And as a result, it affects health, it affects a lot of different things, including earning potential, because if you're working a job that you don't like and you're not good at, your earning potential is decreased. And if you want more information, Harvard did a study. Wow, it's been probably 20 years ago, talking about this misalignment that's out there and considerations that should happen. The second example of, again, how our education system has become misaligned and not keeping up with current needs is I had a friend who was a college professor, and his daughter was interested from starting very young age at being a pediatrician, which is a great way. She wanted to help children and work with children. That's great. And my friend, being a very smart and wise gentleman and father, actually arranged to have his child, his daughter, do in her senior year in school, do an internship in a pediatrician's office, which was a great move. What was interesting about it is the first couple of weeks she was interning, she was really enjoying it and growing, learning. But then the first youngster came into this pediatrician's office with an injury and was bleeding. And this young lady saw the blood and passed out. And so, needless to say, it raised the question, was being in the medical field, especially a pediatrician, a good avenue for her? Now, the beauty and wisdom involved here was that this young lady got to learn this before she had gone into a pre-med post-secondary education and started spending money and spending time that ultimately would not work out for her. And so the misalignment in education and what's going on in the real world is a challenge. Personal opinion here, one of the solutions is parents being parents and taking time to help guide their children into developing who they are, the children are, to the best they can. Let's see. Really got wound up there. Zeiad makes a comment. Says, I tried that, Kevin. I knew what I wanted to work in and studied accordingly many years ago. All to see things didn't work as expected because, for one, the education and the job market don't align. It is so true. Even in the degree areas supposedly aligned with certain careers, there is a problem of misalignment, and we don't seem to have a priority systematically to change that. Rick makes a comment, says tech and trade schools are in big need of people. We need to respect the people who go this route. Indeed, it's really interesting when you get pragmatic with education and begin to look at it on a pragmatic level, things look very differently. And one of the things that is, again, a misalignment or a misunderstanding with systematic education is that we are told, and the education institutions promote this concept, that if you get a higher degree, a bachelor's degree or higher, over the course of your lifetime, your work lifetime, you're going to make millions more dollars than someone that does not have a bachelor's degree or higher. And based on medians and averages, that is a technically true statement. But what they don't tell people is that when you compare and get people aligned in jobs that they're good at and that they want to do versus those that are not, the picture is very different. Example, there's a great video out that I encourage any parent to go seek out and watch. It's called Success in the New Economy. It's been out a while. It was actually produced by a community college, I believe. And it talks about how that the way the information was arrived that you make more money with degrees than not is based on looking at someone with a degree in business administration. And I believe the actual comparison was to an electrician, and assuming that they are median, middle ground in their performance and in their job and so on, then the person with a degree in business administration will make more money. But when you align the two areas, you have someone, and this is statistically more probable, that with a business administration degree doing something they do not like, therefore they're not going to perform even at a median level. They're going to perform on the lower end of the scale. And you take an electrician that is aligned in his career with his education and likes what they're doing, good at it, and they perform on the upper level of the range, then the numbers are actually completely opposite. The electrician in that situation over their work lifetime will make more money than someone with the business degree. So understand the information that's out there. Make sure that you have the information before making decisions. As we look at education, I believe that we should all have the opportunity and even be encouraged to learn. No doubt about it. That should be the case. Let's learn all we can. And in our current society, if you're not willing to learn ongoing, then you are handicapping yourself along the way. But what I do challenge is that, do we have to do it through an institutional system? And is our current institutional system doing what needs to be done to prepare young people for being productive, being effective, and even finding a place of satisfaction and contentment? And I challenge that they are not. They're not aligned with the workforce needs that are around. And I would also challenge that it keeps some young people, I would say a fair amount, from being able to develop in their own creative ways, innovative ways, and so on, because we have locked learning away in these institutions. And so question is whether we should give a legal protection to a right to an institutional education. Based on current circumstances, I can't go along with it. Should we legally protect the opportunity and right to learn? By all means, definitely. But we've got to rethink this, or we're going to continue to watch. And I have stated before, and am anticipating writing an article on a workforce crisis we're facing. And one of the evidence that it's coming is the Great Resignation that's already started occurring. And but we're watching perfect storm in our culture and our society that's going to create problems and disrupt workforce and business as we know it. And so I really hope that before any of us make education choices, that we become better informed as we do so. Don't base it on the norms or the current trends. Find out for yourself, for your children, what is the reality, and make well-informed choices. And there are a lot of resources. And again, when we get off of the podcast, I'm going to share some links that I know of, and happy to share out with people to use to help make better informed education decisions. And based on feedback, I'm going to ask those of you that are here today and those that watch a recording, if you think we should have additional discussion on education, more than happy to dedicate another episode of the Wisdom Seeker Live podcast to it. And we'll have entertain different perspectives, and so that ultimately that we can gain some real wisdom in this area, so we can help guide our children and grandchildren into wiser choices related to learning and education. So thank you, everyone. I appreciate the comments, appreciate the engagement and the involvement. I hope, if you haven't, that you will answer my poll on education, as well as the one Zeiad has out there. And let's see what people are thinking, and see if we can't grow and learn from it. So God bless everyone. Thank you so much. Look forward to seeing you next Monday morning at 8 o'clock here on LinkedIn. Thanks, everyone. Bye.